What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. In recent days, several videos emerged online showing North Korean soldiers being deployed to Russia for their upcoming fight against Ukrainians. This was just a small portion of the troops, so it is not yet 100% certain the actual number of North Koreans and whether they are already fighting in Ukraine or just being sent through training camps. At this very moment, the estimations are between the most conservative 12,000 all the way to 200,000 plus soldiers. This unexpected but logical alliance represents a pivotal moment in the ongoing conflict. After all, this is the very first official involvement of the third country in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Previously, the support was only in terms of weapons, equipment, training and mercenaries. North Korea, on the other hand, sent its actual military to help Russians. Unfortunately, this is exactly how the world wars were starting in the past. It was a conflict between two countries at first, it took some time for the third country to join, but as soon as this barrier was broken, it was much easier for new countries to take up the arms. But if you start thinking about it, this decision by Kim Jong Un to send the troops might actually end up his critical mistake that eventually can cost him his power. Today, guys, let's talk about the viability of this alliance between Russia and North Korea and the potential consequences for the regime of Kim's dynasty. The partnership between Russia and North Korea is very complicated when analyzed, taking into consideration their historical relations. Despite official declaration of camaraderie, North Korea's interactions with both the Soviet Union and post-Soviet Russia have been minimal and often strained. At times, the relationship has even bordered on antagonistic. Just like most of the world, Russians did see North Korea in the past as the worst-case scenario of nation's development and considered this as a failed state. People were either not thinking about North Korea at all, or they thought about it as something bad and undesirable, until war in Ukraine started and everything changed. This raises the question: how did two nations with such a fraught history find a common ground? The answer lies in the similarity of strategic interests and shared opposition to Western influence. Russia, facing international sanctions and isolation due to its actions in Ukraine, is in dire need of allies and resources. North Korea, on the other hand, long exiled for its nuclear ambitions and human rights violations, shares Russia's antagonism towards Western powers. By collaborating, both nations stand to gain. Russia acquires much-needed manpower and military supplies, while North Korea benefits from economic aid and technological support, nullifying the effects of the Western sanctions. This alliance is less about genuine camaraderie and more about mutual convenience in the face of global condemnation. After all, what can North Korea give Russia during peaceful times? Well, not much. But North Korea itself would do anything for an opportunity to receive such powerful ally as Russia. And when the opportunity conveniently presented itself, Kim Jong Un did not think twice about sacrificing dozens or potentially even hundreds of thousands of his countrymen in order to get the audience with the President Putin. To comprehend the implications of North Korea's involvement in Ukraine, it is crucial to understand the internal shifts that have occurred under Kim Jong-un leadership. North Korea is often perceived as a static, totalitarian state, a living relic of mid-20th century authoritarianism. It also demonstrates a perfect contrast of what would happen if you divide the very same country in two parts and let one develop following the Western standards and let the other follow the communism principles. In the end, we receive South and North Korea. Can there be more perfect examples that communism does not work? However, like any political entity, it has experienced significant changes, mostly concealed from the outside world. Under Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un's father, North Korea underwent a period similar to the years of the Soviet Union under Leonid Brezhnev. The regime was rigid in structure, but increasingly soft in enforcement. Borders, particularly with China, were not monitored that much, allowing for the flow of people, goods and information. South Korean media infiltrated the country, and informal markets thrived despite official prohibitions. This unsupervised liberalization was not the result of progressive policy, but rather the government's inability to maintain strict control during a devastating famine that threatened the nation's survival. When Kim Jong Il ascended to power, there was initial speculation that he might pursue economic reforms similar to China's, liberalizing the economy while maintaining political authoritarianism. However, following North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile tests, the international community imposed severe sanctions, with even China and Russia supporting them. Just one more confirmation that Russia was not always such a big friend of North Korea as it is portrayed right now. Faced with crippling economic pressure, Kim Jong Un reversed any moves towards openness. The regime tightened its grip, reinforced the borders, punished the consumption of foreign media, and intensified propaganda. A significant ideological shift occurred as well. North Korea officially abandoned its long-standing goal of reunification with South Korea, instead designating the South as a separate, hostile state. And yes, believe it or not, North Korea and South Korea were looking for an opportunity, even the slightest one, to make their country whole again. At some point, North and South Korean athletes were competing under even the very same flag during the Olympics. So the abandonment of this idea only emphasizes the regime's commitment to isolation and its desire to shield the population from external influences. The proposition of North Korea sending troops to Ukraine introduces a number of potential risks for the Kim's regime. Initial reports suggested a deployment of up to 200,000 soldiers, nearly 1% of the country's entire population. For a government obsessed with control and the suppression of external influences, dispatching such a significant portion of its citizens abroad is a very dangerous decision. Firstly, exposure to the outside world could undermine the regime's strict informational control. North Korean soldiers in Ukraine would inevitably witness realities which are vastly different from the propaganda, which they have been fed for pretty much their entire lives. Even war-torn Ukrainian towns might appear more prosperous than their impoverished homeland, where many survive on minimal rations and have limited access to electricity or modern amenities. Imagine what will happen if North Korean soldiers see medium-sized cities or even major urban areas like Moscow or St. Petersburg, whether during their transition to Ukraine or during some training activities. Secondly, the logistical challenge of monitoring thousands of troops abroad is immense. The potential for escaping and seeking refuge in another country increases, as does the risk of soldiers accessing so-called forbidden information or smuggling contrabanda back into North Korea. The regime's fear of foreign ideas infiltrating its borders is very obvious. Returning soldiers could spread notions of freedom and prosperity that contradict official narratives. Every surviving soldier will come back to North Korea and tell the stories to his friends and family members, and then this information can also be passed down along the line. So as a result, every soldier can potentially influence the minds of hundreds, if not thousands, of his fellow countrymen. Assuming all of them were not sent to just die in Ukraine, of course, or will not be sent to prison whenever they return for so-called re-education. And thirdly, the deployment could weaken North Korea's domestic defenses. While the nation has one of the largest armies in the world, much of it is engaged in non-combat roles, such as construction and agriculture. Diverting combat-ready troops overseas could leave the country vulnerable, especially given ongoing tensions with South Korea and the need to maintain a formidable military presence along the demilitarized zone. This is a very serious gamble that Kim Jong Un decided to take in order to score some political points with Putin. And if the regime that tries to control thousands of aspects of people's lives misses at least one thing, this could lead to devastating consequences for the regime as a whole. The dictatorships might seem immovable, but the people often need one single chance to change everything. The goal of the regime is to never give them such a chance and crush their hopes. The potential alliance between Russia and North Korea in the Ukrainian conflict carries significant global consequences. China's perspective is particularly critical. Historically, China has viewed North Korea as a buffer state and has significant influence over its policies. An increased North Korean alignment with Russia could upset Beijing, leading to a reevaluation of regional strategies and alliances. For Russia, the inclusion of North Korean troops provides immediate tactical support but may further isolate Moscow internationally. Engaging with a regime notorious for human rights abuses and nuclear proliferation could exaggerate existing tensions with the West and alienate potential allies in the future. It also signals a desperation for resources and manpower that undermines Russia's projection of strength. Putin can simply no longer hide his weakness. Asking for North Koreans' direct involvement was one of the last-case scenarios in his book of strategies, and looks like that he is truly out of options and desperate if he decided to take this action. The international community may interpret North Korea's involvement as a dangerous escalation. The presence of North Korean forces in Europe is unprecedented and could prompt heightened military readiness among NATO members. After all, this is the official involvement of the third country, making it no longer the war just between Russia and Ukraine. This is the first step towards world war. And while we are walking there at a slow pace right now, we might actually find ourselves sprinting there within literally a matter of weeks if this problem is left unchecked. This development risks expanding the conflict beyond its current boundaries, increasing the likelihood of miscalculations and unintended confrontations between major powers. All that it's gonna take in the future is some unlucky event, a missile that got intercepted and landed where it shouldn't, or another country's politician getting accidentally injured or worse, and then things can and most likely will escalate pretty quickly. While such event will most likely be an unintended accident, major superpowers will just use it as an excuse to escalate further, especially aggressors like Putin. He knows he cannot use the so-called ultimate weapons just yet without any reason, and he is praying for any of Ukrainian partners to slip and give him this chance. That is why, even though the war feels like a stalemate right now, it is extremely important to not forget how fragile the balance is right now. And a very insignificant weight can keep the scales in either direction. Well, there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.